You're welcome back, and you're still watching Newsnight, reaching you from Nigeria's capital in Abuja. I'm Christian Ogodo.
And I am Amaka Walker.
Okay, well, let's join our analyst now, Associate Professor of Strategic Communications, Adeniyi, and Barrister Frank Tietie is also a human rights activist. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to the program. Nigeria's 62nd independence anniversary. It's been a mixed bag of reactions from Nigerians assessing the speech of Mr. President and expressing a hope for a better tomorrow. Abiodun, what are your thoughts along these lines?
Well, expectedly, I would say the president didn't really disappoint me, because the president, the speech fits the regular bill, often expected of a presidential pronouncement, an average of 45 paragraph speech, but of course there are some highlights. And first of all, let's note that the speech is coming shortly after the UN one. This one also generally provided a bird's-eye view, a helicopter analysis of the state of the nation. And of course, he had on the promises, the tripodal promise around mitigating corruption or curbing corruption, around reviving the economy, and of course dealing with insecurity. He was very careful with his choice of words, not just talking about corruption in the generic terms, but he was talking about entrenched corruption. And of course, he was very explicit in the area of economics. And insecurity, yes, he acknowledged challenges, but overall, you will see that if you look at the speech critically, there are about 11 places where the president used the word continue, which means that there's an assumption, underlying assumption there, that is nothing is concluded yet. Everything he's doing is still work in progress. And that might be a smart way to just let naysayers know that he still has some months to go and he can still achieve quite a lot within this period. And of course, the first-person aspect also played up, just like he did in the United Nations, where he remarked that this is going to be his final speech. Somewhat emotional there, but of course, it's also good that he has started to sign off generally. I think it's okay for him to have come up to speak, typically of the president, providing an helicopter view, like I said earlier. Nice overview. But of course, we still have to expect some more from him with respect to the legacies he's going to leave behind, and the emphasis on leaving behind a free, fair, and credible election is also commendable. We'll look forward to this, hoping that we'll be able to bring about finality in many of the areas that we highlighted.
Adeniyi, of course, we would actually go into segmenting the areas he really highlighted on. But let me bring in Frank Tietie at this moment. Yes, this is his last Independence Day speech he would give to Nigerians as Mr. President. So, for you, what stood out for you that made this particular speech different from the ones that he had given in the past? What was unique?
Well, nothing unique except that the president didn't apologize enough to Nigerians for the failed expectations they had in 2015. The euphoria and the high hopes that he generated have been somewhat leading Nigerians to a state of despondency. So the president should have been noted that in his last Independence Day speech, he should have been sincere enough to acknowledge that many of the things that he planned to do, many of the hopes that he created, he never achieved them. In fact, things worsened. My generation, before and during my generation, the history of Nigeria has been that of progressive degradation. And the kind of fever that President Muhammad Buhari engendered in 2015, the Say Baba movement, is somewhat a replica of what we now have in the obedient movement. Was a woeful failure, and we hope it doesn't repeat itself with what we find now with this movement that is now generating so much hope. We're a country that has been at war with itself. We haven't been able to create a nation. I recall during my days in watching Nigeria's politics keenly in the 80s, where we used to say one nation, one destiny. We never was a nation, we have never been, and our destiny is we're still searching for a destiny as a country. our fights for resources have, the fights for resources have pitched us against ourselves, whether on ethnic, in terms of ethnic divide or religious divide. So it's a very despondent speech, disappointment. The president well noted that and appreciated the tenacity of Nigerians. He acknowledged that in the misery index of the world, Nigeria ranks very high. Because we only have a way of making ourselves happy. Look at, but the president, you know, reflected the somber mood of the country. If you go to the FCT on Independence Day, the cabs are dirty, no decoration, no usual green and white drapes all over the place. You know, the street lights are not working in many areas. You know, the note of celebration, because there wasn't much to celebrate. So the president didn't engender much hope. He thanked Nigerians for being patient. We are very patient people. We forgive a lot and forget. If he did apologize, that would have been better.
Frank Tietie, very strong words from you there, but I'm sure the Buharists will not in any way agree with you that Mr. President in his 7 years so far has been a woeful failure. They would still point a lot to the structural development, political development of the country. But let's leave that and come to Abiodun again. Abiodun, yeah. Mr. President in his speech appealed very passionately to the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities to call off their strike, saying, or, you know, pledging again that the government would do its best within its limited resources. Of course, we know that the nation's economy is dwindling. The finances are not there. Borrowings are, you know, skyrocketing every day. Shouldn't members of the Academic Staff Union of the universities, for the sake of the overall interest of Nigerians, hearken to the plea by Mr. President on this auspicious occasion?
Well, it's fine for the president to wave the olive branch as a leader of the nation. You know, I mean, that's what he's expected to do. It sounded very conciliatory. And of course, he underlined the importance of education. I mean, no nation can joke with education, you know, given its role in human capacity development and, of course, overall growth and development of systems and society. The president sounding like this is salutary, but again, if the president is sounding like this, you know, his lieutenants taking a cue from his body language and his disposition towards resolving this crisis. It's fine as well, and we'll have to expect. I expect that ASUU themselves are not foreigners; they are Nigerians. They are with us. You know, they are hearing the president, but of course, they also want to see concrete steps. You know, taken further from what the president has said as a demonstration of government's good spirit. You know, goodwill towards helping them to be able to teach better. The president asked them to return to the classroom, but ASUU argument is that the classrooms are not even there in the first instance. You know, so where would they return to? You know, so what has the government done over the years or in the last few months, you know, to show commitment, goodwill, good gesture, you know, so that they can at least resume and allow negotiations or the processes of resolving the causes of the crisis to continue? Well, I think that I've always made this argument that government in the circumstance is a bigger loser, and they have to continue to show the greater grace, you know, in resolving this crisis. If government has intervened in other sectors through intervention funds, they can also intervene similarly in giving money, resources to ASUU, to the universities, so that the public universities will not go extinct, will not go under, as this perennial strike is threatening. Otherwise, it's fine, you know, for us to have our public universities reopened. It's what everybody desires. But again, in asking them to reopen, you know, we need to see concrete steps, you know,
right, concrete steps,
far beyond advices.
Right. Well, this is not the first time the president is calling on ASUU to really return to the classrooms while negotiations continue. I know he did make that same, you know, announcement when he was in Daura. I think it was during the Salah. But here we are, 7 months going on to 8. Frank Tietie, let me bring you in here. Well, the president today made an attempt really to summarize, you want to put it that way, his achievements in the last 7.5 years. Would you say that he was able to convey that message and Nigerians really got what he has achieved so far?
Not at all. the president may mean very well for this country. The president he didn't set out to deceive Nigerians, but the enormity of the problems his administration faced actually overwhelmed it. That to the average Nigerian and to the watcher, the international watcher, Nigeria has not fared well under President Muhammadu Buhari. The security has worsened. The Nigerians remember that former President Goodluck Jonathan was hounded from office for some issues regarding corruption, for the inability to tame the intractable insecurity at that time. To now watch how things became so bad under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, how the Naira fell into a free dive for the worse, and how it became very hard to secure employment and to maintain standards of living and to earn the poverty capital of the world status. The average Nigerian knows that things didn't happen well. They may not blame the president. He's just one man. I make a lot of apologies for him, but the truth be told, the president didn't communicate it. In fact, he did the opposite. In fact, he turned off many Nigerians by saying, look, who do you think, in quote, who do you think we are that we don't know what's happening? Why are you telling us all these platitudes and self-adulations, praising yourself that you've done this, you've done that? It doesn't matter. So many ordinary Nigerians didn't take that Independence Day speech seriously because the reality on the ground is opposite. Yes, there could be a lot of things, but the history, is it corruption that the famous Muhammad Buhari is known for in the days of when he worked with Tunde Diagbon to be very vicious against corrupt politicians who now appear to be saints. Take a look, for example, Professor Ambrose Ali, under his time in Bender State, in which I grew up, primary school teachers were sent on scholarship to the United Kingdom to learn skills on how to teach us in primary school. There was free education at all levels, from primary school, secondary school, and university for all the citizens of Bender State. And they had meal tickets, school feeding was free, and all that. Books, I experienced it. And then you said that man was corrupt. And then look at what is happening now. You sent that man to prison for stealing about 30-something thousand naira. And then look at the situation we're in. I'm glad that a university is named after Professor Ambrose Ali that was sent to prison under the administration of Muhammadu Buhari. Now, contrast that time and now, and you know the kind of horrible degradation that we are facing. Under the military, I recall very well, this Japa you are talking about, in our days, it was checking out. And I recall how much the military frantically wanted Nigerians to stay by saying, Andrew, don't check out, Andrew, don't check out. But you see, this time, what are the structures? It has come back again under the administration of Muhammadu Buhari that Nigerians are now running away from this country. But the good thing about it is that it is usually darkest before dawn. We emerged from a civil war to become a very rich country, the richest in Africa. Many countries of the world emerged from the Second World War as very powerful countries, whether Germany or United Kingdom. It cannot be worse than what we have now in this country. And we just hope that 2023 we get it right. President Muhammadu Buhari may have suffered the malignant fate of being a president at a time where things just got worse. He may be a good man. He hasn't lost it. He's still that anti-corruption person. But the Nigerian government, is it tractable? We as a people, whether religiously, ethnically, and as a matter, you find that Nigeria has become a buccaneering enterprise. Everybody just wants to get what he wants for himself. There's no longer public service. It is now personal service. It is now my service. We have generally mostly contributed to the degradation. So it is not so easy to place the blame on President Muhammadu Buhari. But as a matter of fact, we have experienced real-time failure in the last 7 years. And I excuse President Muhammadu Buhari because it's beyond him. Well, we, as a people, we lack ethos, we lack national interest. We don't even have any sense of patriotism towards this country. Look at how standards are falling. Look at our politics. I don't want to get emotional about it, but I think we have
come in here now. You've used very strong words, printable as they might be, but I'm sure not all Nigerians would agree with you here. Biodun, would you agree with the submissions of Frank here, you know, like a nation becoming a debauchery one, you know, we don't have ethos, politics is nothing to write home about, and there's nothing really, it's like there's nothing to celebrate about this administration. Are your thoughts on this line too?
Well, Tietie's tone might be contextual, actually, you know, but I do understand that nation building is usually processual, you know. It happens in a process, you know, and of course, if you look at history from the Chinese city-states up to the French, you know, up until the French Revolution, France was like a confused nation, as the case could be. Italy was not different. You know, even the United States, it remains an immigrant society, and of course, they have grown because of painstaking efforts over the years, through regulations, through laws, you know, and through cashing in, you know, harnessing things that bind them together largely. So the processes are on. The only problem we have as a nation is that we have failed to learn, you know, from the examples of those nations that have built institutions that have been able to build themselves over the years, because we find them more around us now, more than we used to have in historical times where only a few nations were prosperous. Now we have more nations that are prosperous. You know, why can't we learn from them rather than just aping and idolizing them and exporting our values to them, or trying to enjoy their values and failing to develop our own? That's the only problem we have. And of course, even in recent history, there are contemporaries of ours, you know, that were at the same level of development, you know, but of course they have gone far ahead of us. And I mean nations in Asia and South Pacific, they have gone far ahead of us. So what is the problem with our own? Yes, I know we are trying. 62 years down the line, it's not too bad, you know. Yes, it's not all joy, all successes yet, but there are still chances for hope, you know, for development, you know. They will still have prospect, and that prospect can come really, you know, through the prism of leadership. That's a word again, true leadership. And our leadership is one that will come as a national hero, rising above our ethnicities, rising above our fault lines, elevating himself above our differences, and being able to bring us together, you know, as one, such that we can see ourselves more as one, and in seeing ourselves more as one at the level of psychology, then we can proceed to the physical, you know, and institute development, you know, with all the elements that are integral to development, as the case could be.
Well, Abiodun, I like the fact that you're looking at Nigeria with bleak optimism, and a lot of Nigerians will share that with you. But I want to stay with you, Abiodun, real quick. Yeah. You know, you've talked about Nigeria and all of our achievements and the areas that we need work. But at the end of the day, let's talk about President Muhammadu Buhari. For the last time, he addressed us on Independence Day as Mr. President. So let's look back a little bit at his administration. Let's have a general overview of his administration, and what are the legacies that he will be remembered for, really?
Yeah, I think, you know, President Buhari as a person, you know, he was sold to us as a man of integrity in the last 7.5 years or so. I have personally not seen anything, you know, that would detract from that initial identity in terms of integrity, in terms of trying to be Spartan, to be pious. It still radiates those characteristics likely. Maybe the downside is just that he's not been able to ensure that his lieutenants, his aides, you know, copy that kind of trait, you know. That appears to be his weakness. The system seems to have overwhelmed him, as the case could be, and maybe the X factor as well. From if you've been in government, many people who have been in government have also often told us about the X factor. He might have been affected by the X factor, but of course, and if you look at him comparatively with some of his contemporaries in the past, he hasn't been associated with any form of castle, any kind of castle, any kind of cocoon anywhere where he's going to retire to. It's just been that kind of modest person. So you see, at that level, he still remains an exemplar, you know, in the kind of values that a nation, that a leader should actually epitomize, you know. But his failure largely remains in the fact that he couldn't ensure that spread around. But in terms of intention, I think he's been well-meaning. He's displayed characteristics of a good leader largely. But again, the systemic problem might probably have weakened him. But at the level of development, of course, we'll give him credit, you know, in ensuring, you know, the development of our election process. We are still going to witness a general election now, no doubt, you know, by the grace of God. And of course, assurances are up there that it's also going to be free, fair, and credible with the increased introduction of technology, such that transparency can be better ensured. So that's going to be one of his major legacy. And what about the infrastructure? Of course, his lieutenants have told us this, but at the level of values, corruption, the insecurity, economy, questions can still be asked in those areas, which again highlight the question of the issue of imperfection. But of course, we cannot really write him off. He has done his bit. The problem might largely be the nature of our country, and that's why we're saying that anybody that's going to bring about change in this country must look at the bigger picture, the whole picture,
right,
rather than being chronic, focusing on the particular, the specific. You must be able to look at the bigger picture to be able to deal with the system, because our problem is largely systemic.
Adeniyi, a good place for us to actually drop the anchor on this conversation, of course, as we celebrate Nigeria at 62. Adeniyi, Arise News analyst, and Frank Tietie. Gentlemen, thank you for your in-depth analysis tonight. Well, let's head for this quick break now. When we return, there'll be more stories for you here on Newsnight.